The lunch rush had begun, and the air inside the restaurant pulsed with the usual mix of sizzling sounds, clinking glasses, and murmured conversation. Emily wove through the maze of tables with a practiced grace, balancing a tray of steaming plates on one hand. She had worked at Le Grand Chain for almost 2 years, long enough to know that smiles earned better tips than speed. Still, today she was tired. Her double shift and the dull ache in her feet made her wish she could vanish behind the kitchen doors for 5 quiet minutes. At table 7, a man sat alone. He had arrived without reservation, yet the manager had personally led him to the corner booth by the window, the best seat in the house. That was Emily's first clue he wasn't just another wealthy diner. His suit was dark and perfectly tailored, not flashy, but expensive in the kind of way that whispered old money. He wore a gold watch that caught the light like a small sun. But it wasn't the watch that made Emily pause. It was the ring, a heavy band of gold, set with an emerald that gleamed like a green flame. She knew that ring. Her mother had worn one just like it, or so it seemed. She remembered how it would catch the light when her mother brushed her hair or stirred soup at the stove. As a child, Emily used to slip it onto her tiny finger and pretend she was a queen. Her mother never told her where it came from. A gift, she'd say softly, eyes far away. Then one day, after the cancer diagnosis, the ring vanished. Emily assumed it had been sold to help pay the bills. Now, staring at this stranger's hand, she felt a strange tug in her chest, a mix of curiosity and recognition that bordered on disbelief. Maybe it was coincidence. Emerald rings weren't that rare. Still, something about the design, the way the stone was held by 3 delicate prongs instead of 4, looked identical. She approached his table, smile steady though her pulse had quickened. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to start with something to drink?" The man looked up. His eyes were sharp, assessing. He was older, perhaps in his early 60s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of calm authority that filled the air around him. "Just water, please." Sparkling. His voice was deep but gentle. Of course. She turned to leave, but the ring glinted again as he reached for the menu. The words were out before she could stop herself. "Sir," she said, pausing mid-step, "my mother had a ring just like yours." The man froze. It was subtle, a slight tightening of his shoulders, a flicker of surprise that crossed his face before he smoothed it away. His eyes lifted to hers, searching. "Is that so?" he said quietly. "Yes." She smiled awkwardly, instantly regretting the remark. "Sorry, that was probably strange to say. It just caught my eye. It's beautiful." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the ring slowly on his finger, studying it as if he hadn't really looked at it in years. "Where did your mother get hers?" he asked at last. "I don't know, actually," Emily said, shifting her weight. "She never told me. I think it was a gift from someone, a long time ago." He nodded once, still watching her, and then smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Interesting coincidence." "Yes, I guess so," she murmured, stepping back. As she walked toward the bar to fetch his drink, she could feel his gaze follow her. Something about his expression lingered in her mind, that sudden stillness, that flicker of recognition. When she returned with the water, his composure had returned completely. He thanked her politely, asked about the special, and placed his order without another mention of the ring. But Emily's curiosity gnawed at her. Every time she passed his table, she caught him glancing toward her, lost in thought. It was only when he signed the check, with a pen engraved C. Carter and Company, that her breath caught again. The name seemed familiar. She'd seen it on the news once, on the front page of the Financial Times. Charles Carter, billionaire investor, one of the richest men in America. She looked down at the table, at the half-empty glass and the faint scent of expensive cologne lingering in the air. The ring gleamed one last time before he slipped on his gloves and stood to leave. "Thank you, miss," he said, glancing at her name tag, Emily. "You're welcome, Mr. Carter." He smiled, but his eyes seemed distant, as if his thoughts were already far away. Then, as he walked toward the door, she noticed his hand move to his pocket, touching the ring, almost protectively. When he was gone, Emily realized her hands were trembling. The coincidence felt too heavy, too perfect. Somewhere deep down, a quiet voice whispered that her mother's secrets might not be buried after all. Emily tried to shake off the strange encounter as the afternoon wore on, but the man's face, and that ring, stayed with her like an echo she couldn't silence. Between refilling coffee cups and clearing tables, she kept replaying his reaction in her mind. The way his eyes had darkened when she mentioned her mother. The way he'd said her name when he left, softly, almost as if testing how it sounded. By the end of her shift, the lunch crowd had thinned, and the restaurant was quiet except for the low hum of the dishwasher in the back. Emily had just finished wiping down the last table when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Miss Emily." She turned, startled. Mr. Carter stood in the doorway, coat draped over one arm, the other hand gripping a folded napkin. He must have been waiting outside. "Oh," she stammered. "Mr. Carter, did you forget something?" "Not exactly." His tone was calm, but his expression was unreadable. "Could we talk for a moment? Just privately, if you don't mind." Emily hesitated. It wasn't every day a billionaire wanted to speak with her after lunch. "Sure," she said, glancing toward the manager's office. "We can sit over here. It's quiet." They sat at a small table near the back. The air felt heavier somehow, like the moment before a storm. He placed the folded napkin on the table, then slowly opened it. Inside was his ring. "You said your mother had one just like this," he said. Emily nodded, eyes fixed on the emerald that gleamed under the dim restaurant light. "Yes, it looked almost exactly the same. She wore it all the time." "Do you remember her name?" The question caught her off guard. "Of course, Laura Bennett." At that, something flickered across his face, a flash of recognition so quick she almost doubted it. His hand clenched around the napkin, and for a moment he said nothing. Then, in a voice softer than before, he murmured, "Laura." Emily frowned. "You knew her." He didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, eyes distant, as though he were looking at a ghost only he could see. "A long time ago," he said finally. "Yes, I knew her. I loved her." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He continued, voice low and careful, as though each word carried weight. "I met Laura when I was much younger. She worked in a small bookstore downtown. I used to go there every week just to talk to her. She was bright, funny, full of life. My family didn't approve of her. They thought she wasn't our kind of people. But I didn't care." Emily felt her heart beating faster. She'd never heard anyone speak about her mother like that before. "So what happened?" "I was sent overseas on business," he said quietly. "When I came back, she was gone. The apartment was empty. The bookstore had closed. I tried to find her, but it was like she vanished into thin air. Eventually, I stopped looking. I told myself she'd moved on." He paused, staring down at the ring. "I gave her one just like this. A promise ring. I had a second one made for myself, in case she ever found her way back." Emily's voice trembled. "You're saying my mother, Laura Bennett, was that Laura?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time she saw something break through the cool mask of wealth and composure. His eyes shone with disbelief, and something else. "Hope." "She looked like you," he said softly. "The same eyes, the same way of speaking. I thought it was just coincidence when you mentioned the ring, but now," he trailed off, shaking his head slowly. Emily didn't know what to feel. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Another part wanted to cry. Her mother had never spoken of a man named Carter. Only vague references to someone she used to know, spoken with that distant sadness she never explained. "Mr. Carter," she said hesitantly, "my mother never told me much about her past. She passed away when I was 17. I don't know if she ever meant to hide anything, but..." He raised his hand gently. "Please, call me Charles." She swallowed hard. "Charles, are you saying you might be?" He didn't answer, but the silence was enough. His eyes searched hers again, as if trying to find proof in the lines of her face. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out an old, worn photograph. He slid it across the table. Emily stared. It was her mother, 20 years younger, smiling shyly beside a younger version of the man sitting across from her. Her throat tightened. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of them, the photograph between them like a bridge across time. "I never knew," she whispered. "Neither did I," he said, voice breaking. But if she was your mother, then I think I just found the daughter I lost before I even knew I had one. Emily sat frozen, the photograph trembling slightly in her hand. Her mother's face smiled up at her from the glossy paper, younger and brighter than she had ever seen her. The resemblance was undeniable, not only to the man sitting across from her but to herself. The shape of the jaw, the curve of the smile, the spark in the eyes, all mirrored in her reflection. Her throat tightened. "This can't be real," she whispered. "You're saying you and my mom were in love?" Charles finished softly. "Yes, very much so." The world around her blurred. Somewhere, a dishwasher clanged, a waiter laughed, but it all sounded far away. She stared at him, trying to piece together the fragments of two lives that had somehow been separated by decades. "But why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she ever talk about you?" Charles sighed, his gaze distant. "I can only guess. My family made things difficult for her. I was expected to marry someone from my circle, someone who could help strengthen the Carter name. When I refused, they threatened to cut me off. I thought I was strong enough to defy them, but then I was sent abroad on a temporary assignment." He gave a bitter laugh. Temporary turned into years. When I came back, she was gone. No note, no forwarding address. Just gone. Emily pressed her lips together. "She moved a lot before I was born," she said slowly, remembering her mother's quiet restlessness, the way she never seemed comfortable settling anywhere for long. "She always said she wanted a fresh start. Perhaps she thought disappearing was the only way to protect you," he murmured. "If she believed my family would try to interfere, she wasn't wrong." Emily's stomach twisted. She wanted to be angry at her mother for keeping such a secret, angry at this man for appearing out of nowhere with stories that turned her world upside down. But beneath the confusion was something deeper, a strange, aching recognition. Charles leaned forward slightly, his voice gentler now. "How old are you, Emily?" 25. He exhaled shakily. "That would have been just about when I came back and couldn't find her. I looked for years. Eventually I convinced myself she'd met someone else. Got married, had a family. I told myself she was happy, even if it wasn't with me." Emily blinked back tears. "She wasn't married," she said quietly. "Not that I know of. She worked 2 jobs most of her life. She raised me on her own." He closed his eyes for a moment, pain flickering across his face. "Then she must have been so alone." They sat in silence for a long moment, the truth settling like dust in the air between them. Emily studied him carefully, the faint lines around his eyes, the steadiness of his hands. He looked like a man used to control, used to having answers. But right now, he seemed lost, stripped bare by a past he'd thought buried. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "If this is true, if you're really my father, then what happens now?" He looked at her, eyes soft. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't want to rush you. I can only imagine how strange this must feel." He hesitated, then added, "But I'd like to know you. To learn about the years I missed. If you'll let me." Emily didn't answer right away. She was staring at the photograph again, at her mother's smile. She remembered the long nights in their small apartment, her mother humming softly as she folded laundry, the sadness that sometimes crept into her eyes when she thought Emily wasn't looking. Her voice broke as she said, "She never stopped loving someone. I could tell. I just never knew who it was." Charles's expression crumpled. "She never stopped loving me either," he said. "I see that now." For the first time, his hand moved toward hers, hesitant but steady. She didn't pull away. The warmth of his touch startled her. It felt unfamiliar, yet not unwelcome. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "I really do. But I need time. This is a lot." "Of course," he said immediately. "Take all the time you need. I'll give you space. But I'm not going anywhere this time, Emily." The words hung in the air, simple, but heavy with meaning. Emily nodded, her heart torn between disbelief and an inexplicable pull toward the man sitting before her. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the confusion and the shock, a part of her felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of being found. As Charles slipped the photograph back into his wallet and stood, he looked at her with a tenderness that made her chest ache. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said softly. "Same time. Whether you come or not, that's up to you." Then he turned and left, the sound of the door chime marking his exit. Emily sat there long after he was gone, her eyes on the empty chair across from her, her mother's ghost lingering in the space between them. The next afternoon, Emily found herself standing outside the restaurant long before her shift began. She told herself she was just early, that she wanted a quiet moment before work, but her heart knew better. Her fingers toyed with the edge of her apron as she glanced through the front windows. The same corner booth was empty, sunlight spilling across it like an invitation. She didn't know if he would come. She told herself it didn't matter. But when the door opened and Charles Carter stepped inside, dressed more casually this time in a soft gray sweater instead of a suit, her breath caught. He looked almost ordinary now, human, not the untouchable figure from news articles or the man who had upended her world the day before. He saw her immediately, and his expression softened. "Emily," he said, voice low but warm. "You came." "I guess I did." She tried to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her. "I wasn't sure if you would. I wasn't sure if I should," he admitted, pulling out the chair across from her. "But I meant what I said. I didn't want to disappear again." They sat in silence for a moment. The air between them felt fragile, full of words neither knew how to say. Finally, Emily exhaled. "I didn't sleep much last night," she confessed. "I kept thinking about everything you said. About my mom. About you." "I didn't sleep either," he said. "I kept thinking about how different things could have been." She nodded, staring down at her hands. "She was an incredible person. Strong. Kind. She used to tell me that life had a funny way of repeating itself. I didn't know what she meant at the time, but now, maybe she did." He smiled faintly. "She always did speak in riddles." Emily looked up, surprised by how easily he remembered the small details, the kind of things only someone who had truly known her mother would know. That, more than the photograph, more than the story, began to convince her. They talked for a long time, at first about her mother, then about Emily's life. She told him about her years of working odd jobs to pay for school, about her love for literature, and her dream of opening a small cafe one day. He listened intently, nodding, occasionally smiling, as if trying to memorize every word. "I can't make up for what I missed," he said finally, his voice quiet but certain. "But if you'll let me, I'd like to be part of your life now. Not as the man I used to be, but as the father I should have been." Emily studied him carefully. The word, father, sounded strange, too heavy, too new, but it didn't feel wrong. "You don't have to prove anything," she said after a pause. "I just need to know this is real. That you're not going to disappear." "I promise," he said simply. "I won't." For a long moment, they just sat there, the noise of the restaurant fading into the background. Then Charles reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I had this made a long time ago," he said, pushing it across the table. "I wasn't sure I'd ever have a reason to give it to anyone. But now I think I do." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a delicate gold ring, identical to the one he wore, its emerald gleaming like captured light. "It's the twin to mine," he said. "Your mother's was lost, but this one was always meant to find its way back to her, or to you." Emily stared at it, her throat tightening. The ring sparkled faintly in the light, a perfect circle of something that had begun long before she was born. Slowly, she slipped it onto her finger. "It fits," she whispered. He smiled, his eyes glistening. "Of course it does." For the first time since meeting him, Emily felt the tension inside her ease. The uncertainty, the fear, the years of unanswered questions, all of it seemed to dissolve under the quiet certainty of the moment. She looked at him and said softly, "Maybe it was always supposed to end up here. Maybe it was meant to find its way back." Charles reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Or maybe," he said, "it was meant to bring us together." The noise of the restaurant swelled around them, clinking dishes, soft laughter, the hum of life moving on, but Emily barely noticed. She looked at the ring, then at the man across from her, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was standing on the outside of her own story. She smiled, a small, steady smile that looked a little like her mother's, and whispered, "Then maybe this is where it begins."